Hello and welcome back to The Wargamer and another conversion tutorial. This time I'll be showing you how you can convert your Primaris Marines to represent the Salamanders chapter. The miniature that I'll be using as a base for this tutorial is the Salamander's Captain. As you can see here, I've assembled it with the legs, the torsos and the arms. The first Salamander detail that I'll be adding to this miniature will be to replace the cloth cape with a scaled cape, and this cape has been taken from the Dark Elf Corsairs box set. Now before we can apply this cloak to the back of the Space Marine, we first of all need to remove any Dark Elf remnants. Now this includes the torso sections, and I'll be using my clippers to remove these parts. Now whilst you should try not to damage the cloak at this stage, you don't need to worry about being too neat when removing the torso. With the torso removed from the cloak, we can now remove the collar as well, and for this I'm just going to be using a hobby knife. Now place your cloak on a flat surface and gently cut through until you've removed the entirety of the collar. When removing the collar, try not to damage it, as you may have use for it in future conversions. At this stage in the conversion, the cloak is looking a little bit better, however it still won't fit perfectly against the back of the Primaris, so we're going to need to use a hobby file to remove some of the remaining torso from the inside of the cloak. As you are filing away, remember to periodically test the fit of the cloak against the back of the Space Marine to ensure that you get the perfect fit. So after some extensive trimming and filing of the cape, you can see it here attached to the back of the Primaris Space Marine. Now you also might need to do a little bit more filing in order to get the backpack to fit flush against the cloak itself. I had to remove some of the spines in this example, but you can see here that the cloak works perfectly with the Primaris Space Marine. Our Primaris Captain comes with a fabric loincloth, and I want to replace this with a lizard skin, much like the cloak motif that we've got here. So what we're going to be using is another of the cloaks from the Dark Elf Corsairs box set. Now when choosing your cloak, you need to make sure you find one that has a roughly similar shape and size on one of the flat sections to replace the loincloth with. As you can see here on the right hand side, we've got this perfect piece of fabric. Now as the cloak is much thicker than the other areas we've cut away so far, we'll need to use a hobby saw to remove our chosen section. When cutting out the area that we want to remove, I would recommend cutting slightly wider, as this will give you some options later on to remove any damaged scales. Now when using the hobby saw, make sure to use some shallow cuts first until you have a recess for the blade to sit in. Then you can be a little bit more vigorous with your cutting to get through the full thickness of the cloak. At this stage you should have a piece of cloak which is roughly the same shape and size as the loincloth that we're replacing. Now at the moment we have a very flat side that we cut previously. Now I want to add a little bit more definition and detail here, so I'm going to be using a hobby knife to cut away some of the damaged scales and also cut in some of the gaps between the scales as well. By doing this we give our scaled loincloth a much more realistic looking finish. If, like me, you're converting your Primaris Captain, you'll need to remove the cloth from the belt section, and for this I'm going to be using a hobby saw again. Once you have removed the cloth, you may need to do some additional cutting and filing to make sure that none of the cloth remains. So all we need to do now is to glue our loincloth to the Primaris Captain himself. Now the Primaris Captain has a few recesses in the legs where the original loincloth would have sat, so you need to make sure that you cover up these areas when placing our scaled loincloth. Another area of the miniature that offers a conversion opportunity is the sword, and I'm replacing it with a flaming sword from the Age of Sigmar Battle Mage kit. The first task in switching the swords is to first of all remove the blades from their hilts. Now we want to use a hobby knife for this, as it'll give us a nice clean cut. And as you can see here, I'll be applying the cut just above the crossguard of the sword. This will need to be performed for both the Primaris Captain's sword and also the Battle Mage's sword as well. With both blades removed, we can now attach the flaming blade to the Space Marine Captain's hilt. If you find that the two surfaces don't quite line up, you can always use a hobby file to smooth out the two surfaces. Another area of detail that we can add to our salamanders is to add some reptile teeth and claws. One of the best sources for these components is the Space Wolf sprue, as the numerous wolf fangs that adorn the equipment can easily be used to represent lizard teeth instead. Once again, I'll be using my hobby knife to remove these items from the Space Wolf components. If you're not too fussed about getting as clean a cut, you could quite easily use your hobby clippers instead. Once removed from the Space Wolf component, the now reptile teeth can be applied to your Salamander Captain. Now I'll be applying it on the chest area, where the crest would have gone normally. If you're converting other Salamander units, you could quite easily apply these to areas such as weapons and shoulder pads. And here we have the fully assembled Primaris Captain of the Salamanders. Now you may notice that I've added in a slightly different bear head to this component, and this component was taken from the Death Watch sprue. By using a helmetless head, we get the opportunity to show off the blackened skin of the Salamanders when we come to paint him. And here we have the completely painted Primaris Captain. Now you can see how the paint job has really tied in these numerous components from various other kits. Now whilst I focus on a Primaris Captain for this video, you could quite easily apply a lot of the techniques used in this tutorial to many other Salamander units. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please do let me know in the comments below along with your suggestions for future conversion videos. Now I just want to say a huge thank you to my Patreon supporters. It's you guys who make these videos possible. Now if you'd like to support me on Patreon as well, you can do so by checking out the link in the description below, and from there you can donate to me from as little as $1 a month, which will just really help me in producing these videos. So all that's left to say is thanks for watching and goodbye.